The Apples of the Hesperides, is part of Agatha Christie's The Labours of Hercules collection, with each story drawing inspiration from one of the classical Labours of Hercules. In this story, Christie parallels the myth of the Apples of the Hesperides, where Hercules is tasked with retrieving the golden apples guarded by a fearsome dragon. Poirot's quest to recover the stolen goblet mirrors this labor, as he navigates through complex obstacles and dangerous characters to retrieve a long-lost treasure. The story reflects Christie's talent for blending classical mythology with modern detective fiction, adding depth and symbolism to the narrative. Hercule Poirot looked thoughtfully into the face of the man behind the big mahogany desk. He noted the generous brow, the mean mouth, the rapacious line of the jaw and the piercing, visionary eyes. He understood from looking at the man why Emery Power had become the great financial force that he was. And his eyes falling to the long delicate hands, exquisitely shaped, that lay on the desk, he understood, too, why Emery Power had attained renown as a great collector. He was known on both sides of the Atlantic as a connoisseur of works of art. His passion for the artistic went hand in hand with an equal passion for the historic. It was not enough for him that a thing should be beautiful, he demanded also that it should have a tradition behind it. Emery Power was speaking. His voice was quiet, a small, distinct voice that was more effective than any mere volume of sound could have been. You do not, I know, take many cases nowadays. But I think you will take this one. Is it, then, an affair of great moment? Emery Power said, "It is of moment to me." Poirot remained in an inquiring attitude, his head slightly on one side. He looked like a meditative robin. The other went on, "It concerns the recovery of a work of art. To be exact, a gold-chased goblet, dating from the Renaissance. It is said to be the goblet used by Pope Alexander VI, Roderigo Borgia. He sometimes presented it to a favored guest to drink from. That guest, M. Poirot, usually died." "A pretty history," Poirot murmured. "Its career has always been associated with violence. It has been stolen more than once, murder has been done to gain possession of it. A trail of bloodshed has followed it through the ages. On account of its intrinsic value or for other reasons? Its intrinsic value is certainly considerable. The workmanship is exquisite, it is said to have been made by Benvenuto Cellini. The design represents a tree round which a jeweled serpent is coiled and the apples on the tree are formed of very beautiful emeralds." Poirot murmured with an apparent quickening of interest, "Apples? The emeralds are particularly fine. So are the rubies in the serpent, but of course the real value of the cup is its historical associations. It was put up for sale by the Marchese di San Veretrino in 1929. Collectors bid against each other and I secured it finally for a sum equaling, at the then rate of exchange, £30,000. Poirot raised his eyebrows. He murmured, "Indeed a princely sum." "The Marchese di San Veretrino was fortunate," Emery Power said. "When I really want a thing, I am willing to pay for it, M. Poirot." Hercule Poirot said softly, "You have no doubt heard the Spanish proverb, 'Take what you want, and pay for it,' says God." For a moment the financier frowned, a swift light of anger showed in his eyes. He said coldly, "You are by way of being a philosopher, M. Poirot. I have arrived at the age of reflection, monsieur." "Doubtless. But it is not reflection that will restore my goblet to me." "You think not?" "I fancy action will be necessary." Hercule Poirot nodded placidly. "A lot of people make the same mistake. But I demand your pardon, Mr. Power, we have digressed from the matter in hand. You were saying that you had bought the cup from the Marchese di San Veretrino?" "Exactly. What I have now to tell you is that it was stolen before it actually came into my possession. How did that happen? The Marchese's palace was broken into on the night of the sale and 8 or 10 pieces of considerable value were stolen. Including the goblet. What was done in the matter? Power shrugged his shoulders. The police, of course, took the matter in hand. The robbery was recognized to be the work of a well-known international gang of thieves. 2 of their number, a Frenchman called Doublet and an Italian called Ricavetti, were caught and tried. Some of the stolen goods were found in their possession, but not the Borgia goblet. There were, as far as the police could ascertain, 3 men actually engaged in the robbery, the 2 I have just mentioned and a third, an Irishman named Patrick Casey. This last was an expert cat burglar. It was he who is said to have actually stolen the things. Doublet was the brains of the group and planned their coups. Ricavetti drove the car and waited below for the goods to be lowered down to him, and the stolen goods? Were they split up into 3 parts? Possibly. On the other hand, the articles that were recovered were those of least value. It seems possible that the more noteworthy and spectacular pieces had been hastily smuggled out of the country. What about the third man, Casey? Was he never brought to justice? Not in the sense you mean. He was not a very young man, his muscles were stiffer than formerly. 2 weeks later he fell from the 5th floor of a building and was killed instantly. Where was this? In Paris. He was attempting to rob the house of the millionaire banker, Duvauglier. And the goblet has never been seen since? Exactly. It has never been offered for sale? I am quite sure it has not. I may say that not only the police, but also private inquiry agents, have been on the lookout for it. What about the money you had paid over? The Marchese, a very punctilious person, offered to refund it to me as the cup had been stolen from his house. But you did not accept? No. Why was that? Shall we say because I preferred to keep the matter in my own hands? You mean that if you had accepted the Marchese's offer, the goblet, if recovered, would be his property. Whereas now it is legally yours? Exactly, Poirot asked. What was there behind that attitude of yours? Emery Power said with a smile, you appreciate that point, I see. Well, Poirot, it is quite simple. I thought I knew who was actually in possession of the goblet. Very interesting. And who was it? Sir Reuben Rosenthal. He was not only a fellow collector but he was at the time a personal enemy. We had been rivals in several business deals, and on the whole I had come out the better. Our animosity culminated in this rivalry over the Borgia goblet. Each of us was determined to possess it. It was more or less a point of honor. Our appointed representatives bid against each other at the sale. And your representative's final bid secured the treasure? Not precisely. I took the precaution of having a second agent, ostensibly the representative of a Paris dealer. Neither of us, you understand, would have been willing to yield to the other, but to allow a third party to acquire the cup, with the possibility of approaching that third party quietly afterwards, that was a very different matter, in fact, un petit deception. Exactly. Which was successful, and immediately afterwards Sir Reuben discovered how he had been tricked? Power smiled. It was a revealing smile. Poirot said, I see the position now. You believe that Sir Reuben, determined not to be beaten, deliberately commissioned the theft? Emery Power raised a hand. Oh no, no. It would not be so crude as that. It amounted to this: shortly afterwards Sir Reuben would have purchased a Renaissance goblet, provenance unspecified. The description of which would have been circulated by the police. The goblet would not have been placed openly on view. You think it would have been sufficient for Sir Reuben to know that he possessed it? Yes, moreover, if I had accepted the Marchese's offer, it would have been possible for Sir Reuben to conclude a private arrangement with him later, thus allowing the goblet to pass legally into his possession. He paused a minute and then said, but by retaining the legal ownership, there were still possibilities left open to me of recovering my property. You mean, said Poirot bluntly, that you could arrange for it to be stolen from Sir Reuben, not stolen, Poirot. I should have been merely recovering my own property. But I gather that you were not successful? For a very good reason. Rosenthal has never had the goblet in his possession. How do you know? Recently there has been a merger of oil interests. Rosenthal's interests and mine now coincide. We are allies and not enemies. I spoke to him frankly on the subject and he at once assured me that the cup had never been in his possession. And you believe him? Yes. Poirot said thoughtfully, then for nearly 10 years you have been, as they say in this country, barking up the mistaken tree? The financier said bitterly, yes, that is exactly what I have been doing. And now, it is all to start again from the beginning? The other nodded, and that is where I come in. I am the dog that you set upon the cold scent, a very cold scent. Emery Power said dryly, if the affair were easy it would not have been necessary for me to send for you. Of course, if you think it impossible he had found the right word. Hercule Poirot drew himself up, he said coldly, I do not recognize the word impossible. Monsieur. I ask myself only, is this affair sufficiently interesting for me to undertake? Emery Power smiled again. He said, it has this interest, you may name your own fee. The small man looked at the big man. He said softly, do you then desire this work of art so much? Surely not. Emery Power said, put it that I, like yourself, do not accept defeat. Hercule Poirot bowed his head. He said, yes, put that way, I understand. Inspector Wagstaff was interested. The Veratrino cup? Yes, I remember all about it. I was in charge of the business this end. I speak a bit of Italiano, you know, and I went over and had a powwow with the macaronis. It's never turned up from that day to this. Funny thing, that, what is your explanation? A private sale? Wagstaff shook his head. I doubt it. Of course it's remotely possible. No, my explanation is a good deal simpler. The stuff was cached, and the only man who knew where it was is dead. You mean Casey? Yes. He may have cached it somewhere in Italy, or he may have succeeded in smuggling it out of the country, but he hid it and wherever he hid it, there it still is. Hercule Poirot sighed. It is a romantic theory. Pearls stuffed into plaster casts, what is the story, the bust of Napoleon, is it not? But in this case it is not jewels, it is a large, solid gold cup. Not so easy to hide that. One would think, Wagstaff said vaguely, oh, I don't know. It could be done, I suppose. Under the floorboards, something of that kind. Had Casey a house of his own? Yes, in Liverpool. He grinned. It wasn't under the floorboards there. We made sure of that. What about his family? Wife was a decent sort of woman, tubercular. Worried to death by her husband's way of life. She was religious, a devout Catholic, but couldn't make up her mind to leave him. She died a couple of years ago. Daughter took after her, she became a nun. The son was different, a chip off the old block. Last I heard of him he was doing time in America. Hercule Poirot wrote. In his little notebook, America. He said, it is possible that Casey's son may have known the hiding place. Don't believe he did. It would have come into the fence's hands by now. The cup might have been melted down. It might. Quite possible, I should say, but I don't know. Its supreme value is to collectors, and there's a lot of funny business goes on with collectors, you'd be surprised. Sometimes, said Wagstaff virtuously, I think collectors haven't any morals at all. Ah. Would you be surprised if Sir Reuben Rosenthal, for instance, were engaged in what you describe as funny business? Wagstaff grinned. I wouldn't put it past him. He's not supposed to be very scrupulous where works of art are concerned. What about the other members of the gang? Ricavetti and Doublet both got stiff sentences. I should imagine they'll be coming out about now. Doublet is a Frenchman, is he not? Yes, he was the brains of the gang. Were there other members of it? There was a girl, Red Kate she used to be called, took a job as lady's maid and found out all about a crib, where stuff was kept and so on. She went to Australia, I believe, after the gang broke up. Anyone else? Chap called Uguyen was suspected of being in with them. He's a dealer. Headquarters in Istanbul, but he has a shop in Paris. Nothing proved against him, but he's a slippery customer. Poirot sighed. He looked at his little notebook. In it was written, America, Australia, Italy, France, Turkey. He murmured, I'll put a girdle round the earth pardon, said Inspector Wagstaff. I was observing, said Hercule Poirot, that a world tour seems indicated. It was the habit of Hercule Poirot to discuss his cases with his capable valet, George. That is to say, Hercule Poirot would let drop certain observations to which George would reply with the worldly wisdom which he had acquired in the course of his career as a gentleman's gentleman. If you were faced, Georges, said Poirot, with the necessity of conducting investigations in 5 different parts of the globe, how would you set about it? Well, sir, air travel is very quick, though some say as it upsets the stomach. I couldn't say myself. One asks oneself, said Hercule Poirot, what would Hercules have done? You mean the bicycle chap, sir? Or, pursued Hercule Poirot, one simply asks, what did he do? And the answer, Georges, is that he traveled energetically. But he was forced in the end to obtain information, as some say, from Prometheus, others from Nereus. Indeed, sir, said George, I never heard of either of those gentlemen. Are they travel agencies, sir? Hercule Poirot, enjoying the sound of his own voice, went on, my client, Emery Power, understands only one thing, action. But it is useless to dispense energy by unnecessary action. There is a golden rule in life, Georges, never do anything yourself that others can do for you. Especially, added Hercule Poirot, rising and going to the bookshelf, when expense is no object. He took from the shelf a file labeled with the letter D and opened it at the words, Detective Agencies, Reliable. The modern Prometheus, he murmured. Be so obliging, Georges, as to copy out for me certain names and addresses. Messrs. Hankerton, New York. Messrs. Layden and Boscher, Sydney. Signor Giovanni Mezzi, Rome. M. Nahum, Istanbul. Messrs. Roger et Frankenard, Paris. He paused while George finished this. Then he said, and now be so kind as to look up the trains for Liverpool. Yes, sir, you are going to Liverpool, sir? I am afraid so. It is possible, George, that I may have to go even further. But not just yet. It was 3 months later that Hercule Poirot stood on a rocky point and surveyed the Atlantic Ocean. Gulls rose and swooped down again with long melancholy cries. The air was soft and damp. Hercule Poirot had the feeling, not uncommon in those who come to Inishgolan for the first time, that he had reached the end of the world. He had never in his life imagined anything so remote, so desolate, so abandoned. It had beauty, a melancholy, haunted beauty, the beauty of a remote and incredible past. Here, in the west of Ireland, the Romans had never marched, tramp, 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 had never fortified a camp, had never built a well-ordered, sensible, useful road. It was a land where common sense and an orderly way of life were unknown. Hercule Poirot looked down at the tips of his patent leather shoes and sighed. He felt forlorn and very much alone. The standards by which he lived were here not appreciated. His eyes swept slowly up and down the desolate coastline, then once more out to sea. Somewhere out there, so tradition had it, were the Isles of the Blessed, the land of youth. He murmured to himself, the apple tree, the singing and the gold. And suddenly, Hercule Poirot was himself again. The spell was broken. He was once more in harmony with his patent leather shoes and natty, dark grey gents suiting. Not very far away he had heard the toll of a bell. He understood that bell. It was a sound he had been familiar with from early youth. He set off briskly along the cliff. In about 10 minutes he came in sight of the building on the cliff. A high wall surrounded it and a great wooden door studded with nails was set in the wall. Hercule Poirot came to this door and knocked. There was a vast iron knocker. Then he cautiously pulled at a rusty chain and a shrill little bell tinkled briskly inside the door. A small panel in the door was pushed aside and showed a face. It was a suspicious face, framed in starched white. There was a distinct mustache on the upper lip, but the voice was the voice of a woman. It was the voice of what Hercule Poirot called a femme formidable. It demanded his business. "Is this the convent of St. Mary and All Angels?" The formidable woman said with asperity, "And what else would it be?" Hercule Poirot did not attempt to answer that. He said to the dragon, "I would like to see the Mother Superior." The dragon was unwilling, but in the end she yielded. Bars were drawn back, the door opened and Hercule Poirot was conducted to a small bare room where visitors to the convent were received. Presently a nun glided in, her rosary swinging at her waist. Hercule Poirot was a Catholic by birth. He understood the atmosphere in which he found himself. "I apologize for troubling you, ma mère," he said, "but you have here, I think, a religieuse who was, in the world, Kate Casey." The Mother Superior bowed her head. She said, "That is so. Sister Mary Ursula in religion." Hercule Poirot said, "There is a certain wrong that needs righting. I believe that Sister Mary Ursula could help me. She has information that might be invaluable." The Mother Superior shook her head. Her face was placid, her voice calm and remote. She said, "Sister Mary Ursula cannot help you. But I assure you he broke off. The Mother Superior said, "Sister Mary Ursula died 2 months ago." In the saloon bar of Jimmy Donovan's hotel, Hercule Poirot sat uncomfortably against the wall. The hotel did not come up to his ideas of what a hotel should be. His bed was broken, so were 2 of the window panes in his room, thereby admitting that night air which Hercule Poirot distrusted so much. The hot water brought him had been tepid and the meal he had eaten was producing curious and painful sensations in his inside. there were 5 men in the bar and they were all talking politics. For the most part Hercule Poirot could not understand what they said. In any case, he did not much care. Presently he found one of the men sitting beside him. This was a man of slightly different class to the others. He had the stamp of the seedy townsman upon him. He said with immense dignity, "I tell you, sir. I tell you, Pigeon's pride hasn't got a chance, not a chance. Bound to finish right down the course, right down the course. You take my tip. Everybody ought to take my tip. Know who I am, sir, do you know, I say? Atlas, thatch who I am, Atlas of the Dublin Sun, been tipping winners all the season. Didn't I give Larry's girl? 25 to 1, 25 to 1. Follow Atlas and you can't go wrong." Hercule Poirot regarded him with a strange reverence. He said, and his voice trembled, "Mon Dieu, it is an omen." It was some hours later. The moon showed from time to time, peeping out coquettishly from behind the clouds. Poirot and his new friend had walked some miles. The former was limping. The idea crossed his mind that there were, after all, other shoes, more suitable to country walking than patent leather. Actually George had respectfully conveyed as much. A nice pair of brogues, was what George had said. Hercule Poirot had not cared for the idea. He liked his feet to look neat and well shod. But now, tramping along this stony path, he realized that there were other shoes. His companion said suddenly, "Is it the way the priest would be after me for this? I'll not have a mortal sin upon my conscience." Hercule Poirot said, "You are only restoring to Caesar the things which are Caesar's." They had come to the wall of the convent. Atlas prepared to do his part. A groan burst from him and he exclaimed in low, poignant tones that he was destroyed entirely. Hercule Poirot spoke with authority. "Be quiet, it is not the weight of the world that you have to support, only the weight of Hercule Poirot." Atlas was turning over 2 new 5-pound notes. He said hopefully, "Maybe I'll not remember in the morning the way I earned this. I'm after worrying that Father O'Reilly will be after me." "Forget everything, my friend. Tomorrow the world is yours," Atlas murmured, "and what'll I put it on? There's working lad. He's a grand horse, a lovely horse he is. And there's Sheila Boyne. 7 to 1 I'd get on her." He paused. "Was it my fancy now, or did I hear you mention the name of a heathen god? Hercules, you said, and glory be to God, there's a Hercules running in the 3:30 tomorrow, my friend," said Hercule Poirot, "put your money on that horse. I tell you this, Hercules cannot fail." And it is certainly true that on the following day Mr. Rossland's Hercules very unexpectedly won the Boyne Stakes, starting price 60 to 1. Deftly Hercule Poirot unwrapped the neatly done-up parcel. First the brown paper, then the wadding, lastly the tissue paper. On the desk in front of Emery Power he placed a gleaming golden cup. Chased on it was a tree bearing apples of green emeralds. The financier drew a deep breath. He said, "I congratulate you, M. Poirot." Hercule Poirot bowed. Emery Power stretched out a hand. He touched the rim of the goblet, drawing his finger round it. He said in a deep voice, "Mine." Hercule Poirot agreed. "Yours." The other gave a sigh. He leaned back in his chair. He said in a businesslike voice, "Where did you find it?" Hercule Poirot said, "I found it on an altar." Emery Power stared. Poirot went on, "Casey's daughter was a nun. She was about to take her final vows at the time of her father's death. She was an ignorant but a devout girl. The cup was hidden in her father's house in Liverpool. She took it to the convent wanting, I think, to atone for her father's sins. She gave it to be used to the glory of God. I do not think that the nuns themselves ever realized its value. They took it, probably, for a family heirloom. In their eyes it was a chalice and they used it as such. Emery Power said, an extraordinary story. He added, what made you think of going there? Poirot shrugged his shoulders. Perhaps, a process of elimination. And then there was the extraordinary fact that no one had ever tried to dispose of the cup, that looked, you see, as though it were in a place where ordinary material values did not apply. I remembered that Patrick Casey's daughter was a nun. Power said heartily, well, as I said before, I congratulate you. Let me know your fee and I'll write you a check. Hercule Poirot said, there is no fee. The other stared at him, what do you mean? Did you ever read fairy stories when you were a child? The king in them would say, ask of me what you will. So you are asking something? Yes, but not money. Merely a simple request. Well, what is it? Do you want a tip for the markets? That would be only money in another form. My request is much simpler than that. What is it? Hercule Poirot laid his hands on the cup. Send this back to the convent. There was a pause. Then Emery Power said, are you quite mad? Hercule Poirot shook his head. No, I am not mad. See, I will show you something. He picked up the goblet. With his fingernail, he pressed hard into the open jaws of the snake that was coiled round the tree. Inside the cup a tiny portion of the gold-chased interior slid aside, leaving an aperture into the hollow handle. Poirot said, you see? This was the drinking cup of the Borgia Pope. Through this little hole the poison passed into the drink. You have said yourself that the history of this cup is evil. Violence and blood and evil passions have accompanied its possession. Evil will perhaps come to you in turn, superstition. Possibly. But why were you so anxious to possess this thing? Not for its beauty. Not for its value. You have 100, 1,000 perhaps, beautiful and rare things. You wanted it to sustain your pride. You were determined not to be beaten. Eh bien, you are not beaten. You win. The goblet is in your possession, but now, why not make a supreme gesture? Send it back to where it has dwelt in peace for nearly 10 years. Let the evil of it be purified there. It belonged to the church once, let it return to the church. Let it stand once more on the altar, purified and absolved, as we hope that the souls of men shall be also purified and absolved from their sins. He leaned forward. Let me describe for you the place where I found it, the Garden of Peace. Looking out over the western sea towards a forgotten paradise of youth and eternal beauty. He spoke on, describing in simple words the remote charm of Inishgolan. Emery Power sat back, one hand over his eyes. He said at last, I was born on the west coast of Ireland. I left there as a boy to go to America. Poirot said gently, I heard that. The financier sat up. His eyes were shrewd again. He said, and there was a faint smile on his lips, you are a strange man, M. Poirot. You shall have your way. Take the goblet to the convent as a gift in my name. A pretty costly gift, £30,000, and what shall I get in exchange? Poirot said gravely, the nuns will say masses for your soul. The rich man's smile widened, a rapacious, hungry smile. He said, so, after all, it may be an investment. Perhaps, the best one I ever made." In the little parlor of the convent, Hercule Poirot told his story and restored the chalice to the Mother Superior. She murmured, "Tell him we thank him and we will pray for him." Hercule Poirot said gently, "He needs your prayers." "Is he then an unhappy man?" Poirot said, "So unhappy that he has forgotten what happiness means. So unhappy that he does not know he is unhappy." The nun said softly, "Ah, a rich man." Hercule Poirot said nothing, for he knew there was nothing to say.